So 2021 is almost 1 month old already. So how are you doing with your New Year's resolutions? Now, did you have one? Well, anyway, one of the New Year's resolutions people often make is how to organize our life better. How to organize our life better. I mean, let's face it, folks, we all need to organize our life better, starting from decluttering our living space first. Now, you all probably have quite a lot of clutters lying around your house or your apartment, in your attics or your garage or your basement storage that you've probably been thinking about either organize, donate, or throw out. And just been wanting to declutter for the last several decades. Still, you've never found the time or forgot to do or simply too lazy to do. And you've been saying to yourself that I will do it next week or during the spring cleaning or before the summer holiday or before Christmas. And then the next year comes along, they're still there. And meanwhile, more stuff accumulates. So they fill up the rooms and restricting your movement and even making you feel suffocated. And soon, if you don't do anything about it, it will just pile up and make your lives unbearable. Like this. Yeah. If you don't want to end up like that or like him. He's swamped with clutters, and soon he will be cluttered to death. So we've got to declutter our space, our place. Now, the clutters in our living spaces are suffocating enough, but the clutters in our emotional space can suffocate our souls. I'm talking about the emotional clutter that can block the spiritual passage that allows the breath of God to flow into our souls. Now, as we all know that our veins, our veins, high cholesterol level can clutter and clog our blood circulation, slows down the flow of the blood, and it can even halt the flow of completely, causing devastating harm to our bodies. It can even lead to a complete shutdown of our bodies if we don't do something about them. You see, our emotional and spiritual system work similarly to our bodies. The clutters in our emotional and spiritual space can clog the flow of God's Spirit. It slows the circulation. And if we don't deal with them, soon they will smother our souls, and our souls will be cluttered to death. We all have clutters in our emotional system, a sort of emotional cholesterol. The painful memories of our past, the bitterness, the anger, the hurt and the past traumas can clutter our minds and our spirits. They can block the Spirit of God, which is a fuel and the life source for our souls, to flow into our hearts and prevent us from hearing and following God. Our emotional clutter will prevent us from fully living the life that God has originally intended for us to live. So we need to declutter our soul. Declutter our soul. Now, today's scripture text are from Jonah, book of Jonah, chapter 3, and the book of Mark, chapter 1. I will mostly speak from the story and book of Jonah today. Now, we all know the story of Jonah in the Bible. We all know that. Now, Jonah had a huge clutter in his soul that completely blocked him from hearing and following God. He had a sort of complete spiritual breakdown. When God called Jonah to go Nineveh, the city of Nineveh, he turned to the opposite direction and went to Tarshish. Now, why does he do that? Why did he do that? Because Nineveh was his enemy. Now, Nineveh was a city on the east bank of the Tigris River, perhaps founded by Babylonians, but fortified as the capital of Assyria. The Assyrians were not too popular in Israel. In the 8th and 7th century BC, they plundered Palestine, looted and burned the cities, and deported the inhabitants. And in 722 and 21 BC, the northern kingdom of Israel passed out of its existence due to the Assyrian conquest. So for the hearers of Jonah's story, Nineveh was the object of intense hostility. They considered Ninevites their worst enemy, including Jonah. Jonah could not hear and follow God's call to go to Nineveh because in the context of our story, the Ninevites had destroyed his family. He lost his loved ones, lost his home, his friends, his hometown. Without country, the pain and the sorrow of that experience lingered deep within his heart and stuck firmly in his mind and soul. He was a bitter, angry, and sad person. And the memory just haunted him day and night. And then he hears God calling him, Jonah, go and preach to Nineveh. I mean, we could understand why Jonah would run the other direction. The painful memories filled Jonah's every waking and waking moment. The past haunted him and cluttered up his mind, his emotion, and his life. The trauma blocked him from seeing and hearing beyond anything outside of him, outside of that pain, the bitterness, and the hatred. He could not even hear, including God's call. So when God called Jonah to go to Nineveh, Jonah runs in the opposite direction. So God called Jonah, put him into a fish stomach, and gave him a second chance. Okay, Jonah, go to Nineveh and preach. So he went to Nineveh. But what did he do? He cursed at the Ninevites. He said, in 40 days, you guys, in 40 days, you will fry. God will burn you. You will fry. That's basically what he said. But surprisingly, all the Ninevites turned around, repented, and asked for forgiveness. Now, that's not how it's supposed to turn out according to Jonah. Jonah didn't want to go to preach, didn't want there to go to preach, and once got there, cursed them, expected and wanted God to punish them. But instead, the Ninevites turned around, repented, and God changed God's mind. Seeing them repent, God did not punish them and instead let them be. Change of plan from God. So Jonah got really ticked off. He says, what? Are you kidding me, God? You are not going to punish them? Well, then I want to die. Well, in chapter 4 verse 3, in book of Jonah, it says, oh Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. Then Jonah went out of the city and sat down east of the city and made a booth for himself there. He sat under it in the shade, waiting to see what would become of the city. God changes his mind, but Jonah never did change. He was angry and reluctant initially and got bitter and ticked off at the end. He never changed. The pains, the memories, and the hurts still cluttered his mind, his life, so much so that they became his own small God, his downfall. There's a certain clutter emotional clutter or spiritual clutter in our lives that we carry. Maybe not as dramatic and severe as Jonah's case, but the specific memories and events or experience cluttered up our emotions so much so that we are immobilized. So it stops us from receiving the love, responding to God's call. So let me ask you folks, what memories, what experience, what pain, what fear, what anger, what secret, what sadness clog your emotional and spiritual arteries? We must clean up our emotional clutters. We need to come to God uncluttered. You see, in computer language, we need to defrag and clean up all those fragmented, unnecessary files, folders, or cookies, or spams that take up a lot of room in our computer or our smartphone's storage. My wife Sue always comes to me and she complains why her phone is so slow and she can't save more photos of her favorite dear grandchild. And I said, because you've got so much clutter in your iPhone, you need to declutter or save it in the cloud. Send them to cloud. There's a God in the cloud who saves your every photo and store them there. Unless we declutter ourselves from the past mess, we will never be free to embrace what God has in store for us to live in joy. Instead, we will spend our day pleasing others' expectations and demands and aimlessly making life's decisions at a moment's whim and wondering why we feel so stuck. What memories, once again, what memories, what experience, what pain, what fear, what anger, what secret, what sadness clog your spiritual circulation? We must declutter. So how do we declutter our souls? Now, a psalmist gives us a solution to the uncluttered way of being and the life. Psalm 62, verses 5, it says, "For God alone my soul waits in silence. For my hope is from God, my rock and my salvation, my fortress, I shall not be shaken." We need to be still in God's presence. Be still in God's presence. You see, we can't declutter ourselves. We need God. Last week I said something about we need to come near to Jesus and see. So today, let me give you one more spiritual practice for this year. We need to come near and be still. Be still. In other words, we need to practice a spiritual discipline of being still in God's presence. You see, our daily spiritual discipline is a way for us to creating the right condition for God to work within us. We cannot heal ourselves. We cannot declutter our mess. But what we can do is to create the right condition for God to come in and work within us. That's what spiritual discipline is all about. We say, Lord, I am ready. Let your healing stream flow into my soul. Let your life breath to breathe in me. The psalmist says, I wait upon the Lord. Being still requires us to find a place, find a time, and find a frame of mind where and when we can be still. And sometimes it means to do something that very repetitive things, or simply to breathe deeply throughout our day. Now, so for this year, maybe one resolution that all of us can make is for us to breathe deep as we be still in God's presence. So I told you some weeks ago that my son gave me a Christmas gift, iWatch. Yeah, it's right over here. Yeah. Now, it has many functions, including reminding me to stand up when I am sitting too long once every hour. Because when I sit down and work on my sermon or other projects, I can sit in one place for like hours uninterrupted, which is not really good for your health. So this watch reminds me to stand up. So I do that once every in a while, which is good. Now, the other convenient and healthy reminder is to breathe. This watch reminds me to breathe deeply every 1 or 2 hours when I'm sitting. It instructs me to find a quiet place and be still. Then it vibrates for about 3 seconds and then pauses for about 5 seconds. So I follow the instruction of breathing deeply in and out for about 1 minute. And I do that for a few times a day. Well, let me show you, folks. Let me show you, folks. Okay, this is how it works. Okay, and this is how it works. So let us just do some breathing exercise this morning for about 1 minute because it'll be good for you. Okay, so if I do this, it says you've done already 3 minutes already. So I do this, and it says, "Be still and bring your attention to your breath." Now inhale, exhale. Breathe in, breathe out. 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 Breathe in, out. Hey, well done. Well done. So far, I've done 4 minutes, 4 times. 1 minute is 4 times. I've done it 4 times this morning, today, altogether. So this is kind of becoming a spiritual habit for me. A few times a day, I sit still and quiet myself and breathe in and out deeply. And I remind myself to breathe in the breath of God as I inhale and exhale all the clutters in my system. So it's kind of a form of spiritual practice. And I encourage you to do that. Find yourself a place and also put yourself in a frame of mind where you can be quiet and before God's presence. And practice just 1 minute of breathing in for about 3 or 4 seconds and breathe out. Do that for about 1 minute, for about throughout the day, for about 4 or 5 times. You see, the spiritual discipline of being still and knowing that God is with us will change us, will declutter our souls. As we calm ourselves, calm our mind and calm our spirit, and let the Spirit of God touches us, God will clean and declutter our mess and create in us a pure and clean and uncluttered soul. As disciples of Jesus Christ, we need to come near to Jesus as we leave behind the clutters of our past. In Mark chapter 1, Jesus says, "Follow me." And all the disciples, they left their nets, their boats, their family, even their family behind to follow Jesus. You see, what matters is following the one who leads us into life eternal, who leads us to see and join the work of greater things that God is doing in our midst. For that, we leave everything behind, the ugly, the bad, and even the good, to follow Jesus uncluttered.